Hey man, before we jump into this episode, I wanted to share with you two quick announcements. One is about our new Facebook group, exclusively for men and especially for you guys who follow Wolf and Iron. You can head over to wolfandiron.com/thegroup, and that'll take you over to our Facebook groups page where you can request membership. There are a few questions there that you'll need to answer before joining. That helps me to get to know you guys better. It also keeps out the riffraff and the spammers and the bots and everything that would turn a good group into a bad group. Now, the reason for this is kind of twofold. One is so that I can communicate with you guys much better than I've been able to do in the past. I have a Facebook page out there which has a lot of followers, but getting dialogue going, communication and stuff, that's not really the goal of a page. The page is really about collecting likes and just sharing information and giving you guys something out there to kind of share yourself. But to have the kind of discussions that I want to have, I need to do that inside of a group. So that's one of the reasons that I created this thing. The other thing is that I want you guys to be able to have conversations with each other and with me on the topics that are on your heart and on your mind, things that you're dealing with. And so you can do that. Head over to wolfandiron.com/thegroup and request membership. We'd love to have you over there. The second thing is our Ask a Man podcast series. This is where you guys have a chance to ask a question to a man, being me and my co-host, and we're going to take that question, we're going to dialogue about it, we're going to have some fun with it, but we're going to give you an answer, but not just for you, also for the other guys that have the same questions, because guys, we're all kind of having a shared experience here in a lot of ways, and the questions that you have are going to be relevant to another man. So send your questions over there. You can do that by going to wolfandiron.com/askaman. You can send a question right from that form, and be sure that other men are going to appreciate you asking. Okay, on with the show.
Duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now, we are the masters of our fate.
Howdy, gents. Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron podcast. I'm your host, Mike Yarbrough, founder and curator of wolfandiron.com, and I'm glad you're here. Guys, I'm so excited about our guest today. It is none other than Stephen Mansfield. Now, you guys may know Stephen Mansfield from any number of his books that he's written, In Search of God and Guinness, The Book of Manly Men, The Faith of George W. Bush. He's got so many books out there, guys, and they're all really, really good. But you may also know him from being a contributor on Fox News. You may know him from other podcasts that are in kind of the similar sphere of what Wolf and Iron is doing, or his own podcast. In other words, Stephen Mansfield is someone who is a very well-respected voice of reason on a number of subjects that most people don't even want to touch. And so I was super pumped about having him on the Wolf and Iron podcast, and this conversation is just awesome. We cover a good bit of ground in this podcast, and we really spend a lot of time talking about politics because he spends a good bit of time up in D.C. trying to educate those guys about how to speak and how to get their ideas across. And so we bring that kind of stuff home, like how do we speak to other men? How do we get our ideas across, especially in a world that really rejects reason and logic and common sense to many degrees. And towards the end of this podcast episode, we talk about what is he hearing from other men out there as he goes and he does speaking engagements and he gets in front of guys and he's hearing their thoughts on so many different areas. Is there a common theme that he's hearing from guys? And absolutely, there are themes that he's hearing. And you guys are probably not going to be surprised about what they are, but you're definitely going to want to hear his response to them. So stay tuned to the end of the episode. You don't want to miss any of this. And without further ado, here's Stephen Mansfield. Stephen Mansfield, welcome to the Wolf and Iron podcast.
It's great to be with you, Mike. Thank you.
Well, it's an absolute honor for me to be talking to you. I've been following you for quite some time, actually. I've been listening to your podcast. I've been reading your books. And you do a really, really good job of making the rounds on so many different podcasts. So I've had, I feel like I know you just from listening to other people's podcasts and hearing you give your thoughts on any number of topics. So it really is a pleasure to be talking to you today.
Well, you're very kind. I appreciate all the podcasts I get to be on and the major media that I do, and it's good to be able to speak to men and encourage them to be better men, so I'm excited to be with you.
That's great, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. As I mentioned, you cover a lot of ground in the things that you do. I've had the opportunity to listen to your podcast, read your books, and that kind of stuff. I'm going to try to zero in on some things today because there are many places we could go with talking to a guy like yourself, well-respected in a number of different areas. But for the guys that maybe haven't had a chance to get to know you as I have, give us a little idea about who you are and what you're all about.
Well, most people know me as a New York Times bestselling author. I'm not saying that first, just to brag or, vaunt myself, but I've been very privileged to have some books that are largely about faith and the presidency do well. I wrote The Faith of George W. Bush. That's probably my biggest book. I wrote a book called The Faith of Barack Obama. I've also got a book that a lot of guys read. It's called The Search for God and Guinness, and it's all about the history of the Guinness Company and their benevolent work in the world with the profits, the huge profits that they made. So a lot of guys read that because they're fascinated by, not only beer, but doing good with business. And I've written books on Churchill and others, but probably mainly known, if people have seen me on Fox or CNN or MSNBC, mainly they've probably seen me there talking about faith, the presidency. I do a lot of faith and culture commentary for those networks. And so, if something comes up about faith in the Trump administration or, something else of that nature in the world, or Islam, the Kurds, they usually call on me. But then out of that work and that platform, I began to gain a real concern about the state of men in our generation. So I've also written some other books on men, and I do a lot of events and a lot of speaking to men. And the main book that I have on that is called Mansfield's Book of Manly Men. And obviously we're having some fun with the title. But that book has done really well and has opened a lot of doors and been reviewed by a lot of publications. And it's given me a real platform to speak to men. And then I've written a little booklet called Building Your Band of Brothers that is started as kind of a companion to Mansfield's Book of Manly Men. So basically, I write a lot of books. I do a lot of speaking and lecturing around the world. I'm the faith and culture commentator for Fox and CNN. And then I do everything to impact men that I possibly can.
Wow. So I know a lot of guys are listening to this and going, okay, the Stephen Mansfield guy is somebody I need to be following along with because he's into a lot of good stuff. So I read your Book of Manly Men. I also read In Search of God and Guinness, and I thought they're both great books. But as a new business owner, the In Search of God and Guinness was just excellent because it really does set a new kind of standard for what it means to be generous with your wealth and to make generosity a big pillar of what your business is about, right? And to do that really from the heart of a Christian man. And so I really appreciated that book, even though I don't drink Guinness, but I still found it really interesting. So,
if you read the book, so I don't drink beer either.
Yeah,
it's funny. I've written one of the leading books on beer, but frankly, it's not that I have anything against alcohol. I drink alcohol. I just don't really care for the taste of beer, which doesn't make the Guinness people happy for me to say out loud.
Well, at least you're being honest, so that's good.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I know you've got a new book coming out called Choosing Donald Trump. And I can't wait to read this one. It's on pre-order right now. So guys, go to stephenmansfield.tv and you can see some links out there to the book. And there's probably some other links out there we'll post as well. But this book that you got coming out, Choosing Donald Trump, give us an idea of what that one's about.
Well, obviously everybody's surprised, even if they're delighted, they're surprised by his victory in the 2016 election. And the lens through which I tend to view American politics is sort of faith and culture. And so I've written this book essentially to describe what happened religiously in that election. Now, it's not just a boring electoral history. It looks back at Donald Trump's spiritual life and religious life. It looks at what was going on in our society, what was happening with evangelicals and so on. Because the fact is, the vast majority of conservative religious people in America voted for him.
Yeah.
And yet he could, in one sense, you could almost say he's the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So people who pay attention to what I do, one of the things I'm known for, I'm very grateful for this reputation, is that I'm fairly objective. I wrote both about George W. Bush and about Barack Obama. Now, I make it clear that I'm definitely right of center. I'm without question a right of center conservative. I'm not hard right, but I'm right of center. So I never hide that. But I can tell a story of a person I don't necessarily agree with and do it without being bombastic. So all of that to say, this book is a pretty objective look at Donald Trump, how he got elected, what was going on amongst conservative religious folks in America, and of course I consider myself part of that, to elect him, and what all of that might mean, including his religious training, for the future. We're living to a very tumultuous presidential administration, like him or not. And I don't know anybody who's 100% happy or anybody, and I do know some folks who are 100% unhappy. But the bottom line is for me to try to speak to both sides and say, here's some things you need to know, and here's a way through this. So I'm excited about doing the media for it and really speaking to the nation through this book.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to answer a lot of people's kind of longings to know, how did we get here? You study history quite a bit. I study history quite a bit. And, you look back on past presidents and what, the nation wanted to see in a man that they elected. And then you look at Donald Trump and you go, okay, I'm not, really, did this happen? So that'll be great to get to. And maybe we'll have you back on once that's out and talk through some of those things. But I think you mentioned something about really having an objective view of things and being able to speak to that. And that actually jumps right into what I wanted to talk about first, which is this. You do a really great job of communicating to the world of men and just people in general on a number of difficult topics. And I think that most guys that are listening to this are going to say, man, I really want to be able to communicate better to people as well. But whenever I try to give an argument, from my side of things, or I try to bring some logic or some reason into a conversation, it's in one sense, it feels like it falls on deaf ears, but there's another sense where we're trying to speak to a society where reason is kind of being rejected and in favor of, emotionalism maybe. And so I wanted to just get your thoughts on that. Like, how do we as men do a better job of getting people back to rational discussions, reasonable debates, and out of the emotionalism of it all?
Man, I really appreciate that question. When we were talking about my bio, we didn't even mention the fact that I run a consulting firm in D.C., and this is what we do. We help people communicate better. So I'm thrilled for the question. I got to tell you that first of all, there's an important principle for everybody to know, and that is more is caught than is taught. You've probably heard that before somewhere in your education. But the what you're giving off, I'm not going to use the word aura because I'm not into that kind of religion. But what you're transmitting, we actually call it the tele. In communications theory, you call it the tele. Like in football, we'll say there's a tell. This guy twitches when he's going to go for a pass, that kind of thing. You can read what's going to happen in the play. Well, there are things you radiate without even opening your mouth. And whenever we do communications training for people, we always start with that. Stand there and let's tell you how you're perceived before you even open your mouth. Well, number one, if guys want to communicate better, the first thing they can do is, first of all, don't be angry. A lot of what's going on today is that angry people are communicating. And I don't care if you're asking me to pass the chocolate cake or if you're offering me a piece of chocolate cake. If you're angry and yelling at me when you say it, it's going to be a negative experience. So the first thing I urge people to do is resolve the issues in their soul so that they can not communicate angry. A lot of the reason you've been very kind to talk about how I communicate and what I do, and a lot of the reasons that I have a little bit of respect on both sides is that I'm not angry at anybody. I'm not angry. I believe in a sovereign God. I believe God rules the world. I'm going to play my role, and I'm not ticked off at anyone. There are people I don't care for. There are people I wish hadn't done what they've done.
Sure. But
I'm not going to sit there and talk to someone on the air or one-on-one and just be ticked off the whole time. So anger is a major part of the issue. The second thing is try to like the person you're talking to. I sit there and talk to Chris O'Donnell on the air. I sit there and talk to Rachel Maddow. I sit there and talk to Hannity or whoever when I'm doing my stuff on the air, and I try to like them. I do like some of them. Some of them are actually friends. But if you can be positive towards the individual, realize they didn't get here because they're just evil, and came from the pit of hell, but because they are people who, care about the nation. You might be ticked off at the NFL players who are taking a knee or whatever, but they're basically patriots who just want to improve the country, and they're concerned about the fact that people with their skin color are getting shot. And so try to be positive if you're talking to them. Try to understand them. I'm not saying you have to agree with them. I'm just saying if you're ticked off at people, and if you don't like them, all that's going to radiate. And then the other thing is, from that calm position, figure out ways to communicate what you have to say in brief, sometimes humorous, and calm ways. Phrases, ways to say it, analogies. If I can go a little Southern, because I have half of my background is Southern, I'll say, it's like my grandmother used to say, like I'm always whipping out a phrase. My grandmother used to say, don't talk in public about religion and politics. And I spend all my time doing that. People just laugh and they relax and they pretty much understand that I'm a human being. So what we've got a lot of right now is a lot of angry talking heads screaming at each other. And if you want to communicate well, calm down, like the person you're talking to, and pre-plan the way you're going to make your case. Don't just get up there and spew words in some kind of erratic, angry, emotional, spitting, drooling style. It will never work. And it never hurts to lower your voice, and it never hurts to say something that appeals to the other person. Like, if you and I were having a debate right now, and you were strongly disagreeing with me, you would be hearing me say, "Now, Mike, I understand why you can think that way. I understand, like I'm Native American. So let's just say that you were picking on Native Americans. So I understand Native Americans have done some unwise things in their history. So I understand why you're feeling that way. But let me give you some different perspectives. And now, do you see what I've done?
Yeah.
I've shown some compassion for your side. I've explained that I care. I've shown that I value you as a human being. And yet I'm telling you calmly and in a friendly tone that I disagree. I'm about to help you out. So those are some of the first steps men might take to communicate a little bit better.
Well, those are really great. Those are absolutely great. And I think some of those are certainly easier to do when it's person to person. And that's really how big discussions should be had, one-on-one. But, obviously, work, employers are kind of putting the cap on those kinds of discussions. Society's sort of squeezing us to say, no, don't have political or religious discussions, out in public anymore. And so I think a lot of these things are happening online. And so coming across the proper way when you're trying to have a discussion with somebody on Facebook or whatever social media platform, is more difficult. And one of the things I would add into that, to what you said, is don't go in assuming that because of what a person has said, that they're actually attacking you or your idea. A lot of times the person on the other end, that person that you're trying to respond to, really just doesn't have the ability to communicate very well what it is they're trying to say. And so,
yes, right.
Sometimes they're very short, they're very blunt because they just don't have a very good knack for, drawing out their ideas, getting what they really feel on the table. And so what ends up happening is they come across as very mean-spirited, very just, here's how it is, there's no debate, and it looks like an attack. But oftentimes it's not. A lot of times it really is.
Mostly bad communication is a result of what's going on in a person's soul before they open their mouth.
Yeah.
So if you're insecure, if you're angry, if you're afraid, those things are going to dominate. And by the way, they're going to get in the way of smooth communication. So when we work with people in communicating well, either one-on-one or in a corporate environment or on television, we try to help them resolve or at least get control of what they're feeling. If you're having a discussion with family members about immigration, and you're just terrified, that Mexicans are coming across the border and taking over the world.
Sure.
I'm making that extreme to be goofy. Well, then, you're going to be speaking out of that fear, and that fear is going to morph into anger, and you're not going to engage anybody, even people who might have agreed with you. You often hear in Washington somebody saying something you basically agree with, but they're saying it so angrily or so insultingly or so badly that it's like you want to just turn away and, not even listen. So a lot of what makes bad communication, as you're indicating, is stuff going on in your soul before you open your mouth. And people often come to us and say, give me some verbal tricks I can do to win this debate. And we say, well, 80% of it is going to be getting you resolved, and then we'll talk to you about how to actually say it. That's so the majority of good communication is what's going on in your soul before you even step up to the podium.
That's good. That's really good. Now, I know you spend a lot of time in D.C., and somehow you have managed to not have your soul completely corrupted, and you come back to, I think, Nashville, right? And then you decompress maybe, and you go back up to D.C. with a fresh, American spirit and all that kind of stuff, and infuse it with those guys. So that's awesome. And so give us an idea a little bit of what it's like from a man on the street, boots on the ground kind of thing in DC, because we all have concerns about what's happening in Washington. It's not the big political season starting up yet, but it won't be long before we start hearing it again. Is there a chance or a place for reasonable discussion and debate up there amongst people who disagree?
There is actually a great chance for that, and a lot of it is happening. I have to tell you that one of the things that is disturbing is how much what you see on television is theater, and there are really good things going on behind the scenes. Many times I've been on the Hannity program, for example, and everybody's screaming at each other, and you would think these guys are going to murder each other in the green room, and as soon as the cameras go off, one guy who's on one side of the aisle turns to the other guy and says, hey, got time for a steak? And then we all go for a steak, and we're all sitting there yucking it up 2 hours later,
wow,
on a second glass of wine or something.
Yeah.
And so what I'm not saying everybody's all buddy-buddy, but a lot of that yelling and screaming on the floor is not really that heated. There are good things happening. There are good patriots there. And frankly, our founding fathers designed our system so that conflicts would happen, They considered that conflicts would provide checks and balances. They didn't want one party ruling, one branch ruling, one person ruling. They wanted the decentralization of power. So actually, very important things are being debated. Some good things are being done. Congress is, by the way, the most disappointing branch. It's the most cowardly,
Yep.
And that's because we've got a couple things we need to change. I don't know how we're going to get anywhere as long as members of the House have to run every 2 years. Now think about that. A political campaign now takes about a year, and so that means that these people are spending half their time raising money and the other time spending it on their political campaigns. So I think we should change that. We probably should have term limits ultimately. But bottom line, there are good things, and I'll tell you where some of the people who do the most good. One of the things they have going for them is I find that some of the calmest, most effective people are people who are not, how can I say this, completely dependent upon the job they have. For example, if you run for Congress and you're from a family that runs, let's say, a ranch where you live, and you're fine financially. You're not a billionaire, but you're fine. You'll go back to the ranch when you're done with Congress, and you're not living on the ragged edge of every donation. Well, then you can calm down and do good. But a lot of these guys, they don't have other income. They're living on a relatively small salary, quite frankly, for the D.C. context, and they're just desperate for every contribution and for making sure they win the next election, and that's what looms big in their brains, and it's actually slanting our politics quite a bit. So I think some of the people, and I feel the same way. I don't live on what I do in Washington, D.C. Yep. I make my living by speaking and by writing books. So when I go do anything in D.C., I testify before Congress, or I advise somebody. I'm not making money off of that. So I'm not living on the frantic edge, of gotta make another connection, gotta get another check, gotta impress somebody else. I can just kind of relax and do my job and leave, and therefore they notice the different sort of attitude. And so a lot of this does have to do with money and support, and whether people feel like they can take care of their families and live a decent life while they're trying to do good up on the Hill. So some practical things are going to come to the fore, but I do think good things are happening in D.C. and I think we're actually seeing some positive trends. And even as raw as Trump is in office and as dysfunctional as his White House has been thus far, it's actually forcing some people to get it together and to unify and to communicate and to get some good things done. So long term, I'm optimistic.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and especially about Trump. I mean, I think one of the things that he does well is he's unexpected in a lot of his decisions, right? He doesn't really follow the pattern of past presidents. He sometimes does what he says he's going to do, and sometimes he doesn't, which that is a pattern. But you know what I mean? You don't really know what's coming from Trump, right? And so it's I don't know if he's the focal point of energy for everybody, but there are a number of opportunities, I would imagine, for people to come together and say, in order to figure this thing out, we got to come together. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and he's a disruptor. And I'll tell you quite frankly, you and I as citizens are better served when it's bumpy in D.C. You're better served when left and right are smacking into each other. You're better served when Congress and the Supreme Court and the executive branch are not communicating, are not coordinating well. They're not supposed to coordinate well. When you need to be nervous is when they're all sitting up there drinking cocktails and slapping each other on the back. That's when things are not serving you well, because you sent people to Congress to make change, to represent certain views, and the assumption is there are people on the other side who are going to oppose. To put it in brief, you want D.C. to be a bit of a fight. And it's only during things like World War II or something like that, or 9/11, that you want everybody to be all happy and singing the national anthem on the Capitol steps. The Founding Fathers built conflict into our system, and frankly, conflict serves you well. That brings compromise. That brings the airing of views. Yes, it's exhausting. Yes, it's hard to watch. But if you're actually there on the ground, and if you know a little bit about history, as I know you do, then you go, well, this is actually good. When the White House and Congress are too much in bed with each other, we're in trouble. And so I'm not bothered by either him being a disruptor or by the fact they're not getting along up there right now. Actually, some good things are happening through it all.
That's good. Really good perspective. And one of the things I want to remind the guys that are listening to this about is that, we send people to Washington, we see them disagree until the next election cycle comes up, right? And then they just continue to disagree and not much gets done. And one of the things I want to remind the guys about is that they're actually making decisions on a lot of things that they're not designed to make decisions on. I mean, our government is not supposed to be deciding whether or not you have a low flow kind of flush toilet in your house or, you use solar energy or not. And so, if you're expecting politicians to go and represent everybody on every little issue, don't expect, I mean, we can't even agree on those things. You can't get a group of 25 people together, that are going to agree on such minor things. And so, I think we've really stuck in, we've done it. I know a lot of it's been, corporations really pushed for a lot of this kind of stuff, but we've really put a lot on the backs of our politicians that really need to come back into the hands of just the Americans to make decisions, and allow the politicians to focus on the big things, and leave the smaller items, the day-to-day stuff, up to us. And so that's one of the changes that I'm hoping to see over the next few generations.
Well, I have to say too that one of the things that really encourages me is that the millennial generation is maybe with a little bit of their cynicism about politics, they are saying, well, let's just fix it ourselves. There's a school that needs to be painted and cleaned up and fixed and re-roofed and with a better playground. Okay, well, let's do an app for that. The millennials are. Everything runs through their cell phone.
Right.
And they'll raise the dang money and go have it done over a summer. And I really do believe that ultimately all politics might not be local, but definitely all good things that happen in our lives, I think, come from a local or context, right? So I'm not bothered that you send 535 people to Congress, to the House, and they fight. That's what we send them up there to do. Represent values other people's don't share. That means you're going to have a fight. But quite frankly, if my street has got a lot of trash, or if there's a lot of gangs arising in my city, or if a school needs tending, or the little old lady down the street needs her yard done, let's. I like the idea that the millennials are returning us kind of to a Peace Corps, youth going off in the world to do good kind of attitude. And when you combine that with a high-tech approach and a high-finance approach, I think a lot of great things are going to happen at a local level. And that's ultimately it. I don't believe in sitting around waiting for Superman. I don't believe in sitting around waiting for Congress to pass the law. Let's get her done. And I think that's what's happening.
No, that's really great. That's really great. I think about back in the day when we had kings that were ruling over people, we had to wait for the monarchy to kind of change out. Somebody had to die or get killed or something like that. And then all of a sudden fashion would change, and new industries would open up, things would start to move. And then it'd be pretty much the same until, eventually another death or, another change up of some kind. Well, I mean, at least back then people died fairly regularly. So that was okay, I guess, in some ways. But, we don't have to do that as Americans. I mean, and as free people, we don't have to wait on the government to pass laws before we make decisions and move forward. So I think that's absolutely right. And I totally agree with you on the millennial piece there. I think those guys have just an understanding of, it's a different kind of do-it-yourself mentality, but they also understand that they are equipped to do it better and in more of a context of a we or an us kind of approach than we ever were in our generation. So that's very good.
Yeah, I've actually been sitting in a meeting, just about you guys sitting at a restaurant trying to talk about some things, and they said, we have been waiting for the state legislature to take care of this certain thing for years. And I just said, well, how much does that actually cost? And when somebody there actually knew what they were talking about, it was like $5,000 when it all came. And I said, look, I mean, I'm not super wealthy, but I just said, look, I got 500 of that. How about you guys? And I'm telling you, by the time we finished our hamburgers, we had funded something and made a plan for something that they'd been waiting for the state legislature to take care of for about a decade. And I know not everything can be solved that way, but those that can, we're Americans, and we basically got founded as a country by being disappointed in a previous government and saying they're not taking care of us, let's take care of ourselves. And I think that pervasive spirit needs to permeate our current generation. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Very good. So give us an idea of what the average American guy can do, to influence the political realm of things. It seems like sometimes it seems like we're just helpless. We get a list of politicians. Here's who you're going to vote for. You vote for the guy that you think is going to be doing a good job, ends up being a disappointment, and nothing gets accomplished. But what can the average person actually do to make an influence on the political scene? Well, I'm sure they've heard it 1,000 times, but let me say, first of all, that and what I mean by 1,000 times is some of the things I'm going to recommend here. Sure. But let me say, first of all, that we're living in a generation where it's very possible for just your average stay-at-home mom, your average guy who doesn't have a political role, to have a huge impact. So first of all, I'm thrilled that we're living in this age. The number one thing you want to do is get informed. If all you do is watch Fox all day, if all you do is watch MSNBC and nothing else, if all you do is read certain websites, bear in mind that you're getting a certain perspective. Yeah. And so get educated at a broader level, know your facts, assume that there's something flawed about the diet you're eating if all you're doing is watching one network or reading one website or one type of website all day. And that's going to make you less effective if all you're doing is repeating whatever, screaming at people, whatever you've heard on one news channel all day. Second of all, be aware of the power of social media. Let me assure you that a hashtag of your congressman, a hashtag of the causes you care about, you've got people monitoring that. If you go on Twitter, and when I do a hashtag for my congressman, and it's not because I'm prominent necessarily, it's just that believe me, his staffers are tracking whatever's happening. So it's possible for a 14-year-old kid. In fact, I can tell you stories. I won't bore you now, but I can tell you stories about high school kids who got their ideas heard by the actual congressman and then repeated on the air by name.
Wow.
Well, Joe last week told me so-and-so. And why was that? Because the 13, 14-year-old knew how to just, put the right hashtags at the end of his tweet and then link to his blog. So the congressman said, well, this is interesting. A high school kid's talking about this, and he's done a blog. They read it real quick when they're on the airplane. The staff recommends it. And before long, on the next discussion show, 13-year-old Joe's blog was actually mentioned. Now, is that a little bit of PR? Sure, but that's fine with me.
Yeah.
The fact is that millions of people heard 13-year-old Joe's thoughts. And the congressman also said, I've been thinking about this, if that's how the next generation is thinking, I'm going to modify some things. And so yesterday I modified my proposal. I mean, Joe, little Joe, and I'm not going to mention his last name, I actually know him, he actually, made a difference. And he did it, between classes, in high school, a freshman, and, pulling all this stuff off. So all that to say, there's more chance than ever. Also, there are more forums than ever. There are you can write, if you have any ability to write at all, you can get on these online forums and so on, write for Fox News online, write for MSNBC online. And so I think there's tremendous opportunity. Go to the forums, use social media, write letters to the editor. I mean, newspapers are still read. I read the Washington Post, Washington Times, and the New York Times every day. And I pay attention to what's said, and a lot of leader types in D.C. do. And then finally, actually sit down with your congressman. In my case, I live in both D.C. and Nashville. Right now I'm in downtown Nashville. My congressman is 2 blocks away, and I happen to know that he has office hours where he just takes anybody who walks in to talk to him.
Wow.
That means anybody, a 10-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 90-year-old, a person who's never even been to D.C., who just has one issue they care about, can walk in the office. And by the way, it's not that crowded. The guy's office is actually built into the beautiful Nashville downtown library. And his name is Jim Cooper, and he just he's open to talking to people. So you can actually have an influence. These people are more accessible than you might think. So there are all those sorts of things. And then of course you go to the next level that I think we all know about: join organizations that lobby and make us think about certain issues. And but basically anyone just with their cell phone can probably be seen and heard by people in prominence. And, I've even had members of the Joint Chiefs. Now, I speak to the Joint Chiefs from time to time, but I've even had individual members of the Joint Chiefs get back to me on something that I tweeted. And it's not because I'm any kind of prominent. It's just that they'll respond to good ideas, and everybody's learning they got to be interactive with the people more. So tremendous opportunities. Nobody should feel frustrated at not having a voice. They are listening. They are paying attention. Maybe it's not because they care about your particular cause, but they do care about being reelected, and they do care about what their constituents are thinking. So even if their motivation is not exactly Mr. Smith goes to Washington, the fact is that they're paying attention.
That's good. Solid information. That's really good. So no excuses, men. Get out there, take some action, and that's really good because a lot of times you tweet something out there, you're just expressing your opinion, you assume it just goes off into Twitter space or whatever happens there. 2 or 3 of your followers or, maybe pay attention to it. But it's good to know that kind of stuff, is really important. Get the hashtags right and let your opinion be known. So that's good. I want to transition a little bit from the political stuff over to more of the straight up man talk stuff. And one of the things that you mentioned is that you have a chance to talk to a lot of guys throughout the year, both, I know you're having conversations about the books that you write, but then you're also doing speaking engagements and things of that nature. And one of the things that I had a question about was, is there a particular or is there a common issue or a need that comes across from men that you speak to where they just say, Stephen, I got, this on my heart, and you just hear this coming up time and time again, or maybe there's several of them, but could you just maybe give me an idea of what some of those things are?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the things that guys talk to me about the most are, frankly, being unfathered and not having the lore, the craft, the skills, the vision for noble manhood being passed down from generation to generation. So when they come to me, I'm a little older than most of them. I'm in my 50s. So when they come to me, they're often saying, look, man, my father, he was a good guy, but he didn't teach me anything, or my father wasn't in the home, or, I never knew who my father was. And so, I want to be a good man. I've read your book, or I've read some other books by authors, or I saw something at my church, or I captured something in some movies. And, can you tell me how to work this thing through? And can you advise me? And I got to tell you, the reason I wrote this little booklet called Building Your Band of Brothers, it's just a little paperback thing, is that I really do believe that one of the most important things men can do, other than gaining a vision for noble or righteous or great manhood, whatever you want to call it, the reason, other than gaining that initial vision, the thing they most need to do is build a band of brothers. And that's not just some program I'm on. I'm talking about having a group of men around you that you're investing in, they're investing in you, and that you guys are helping each other with a great project of becoming great men. Most men walk alone. We know that. We know that the suicide rates are high, especially in England, for example. And when we do the postmortem on men over 50 who do commit suicide, most of them are write suicide notes or have told someone, I'm alone, I have no friends, and life's not worth living as a result. In the United States, one particular survey shows that the average man cannot name a best friend. The average man cannot identify who he would have go get his son out of jail if he, needed somebody to while he was on a business trip or something.
Sure.
And the one I like the most, because I've got a great wife who's very competent, but still, if my wife had a crisis at 3 a.m. and she's flitting around the house in her nightie, and who knows, the plumbing's gone crazy, the dogs run away, the kid's in trouble,
sure.
Who would I call to go over there and take care of her and trust, both morally and ethically, as well as in terms of competence? That's an interesting call. Most men can't name that person.
Yeah.
So most men are walking alone. The loneliness is killing them. And the other thing is that they don't have, as a result, other men who see them in a 3D view and can help them be better men. The fact is we don't see ourselves clearly. The fact is we need other men who can speak into our lives and help us improve. And I call this the free fire zone. What you want to achieve with a band of men is the free fire zone. And that's basically where anything that needs to be said to make us better is said. If, whatever needs to be confronted, whatever needs to be talked about, whatever helps us get better as men, we're not going to just sit there and twiddle our thumbs and say, gee, I hope somebody talks to him about that. We're going to help each other. We're going to work it through. We're going to confront it. We're going to talk about it. And then we're going to, develop a plan. So the things that men talk to me about are varied. The solution is that they are, number one, in a continual pursuit of understanding what manhood is, understanding God's will, understanding the truths and the lore of noble manhood, and then they've got a band of brothers who are helping them walk it through. And if you're in a great big church, there's a men's ministry, that makes that a whole lot easier. If you're not in church and or you're out just on your own, or you're in the military being moved all the time, or whatever your situation is, you can always pull some men around you, who read the same books, think about the same things, talk about this stuff, and have a lot of fun along the way. Whenever men get together, some animals need to be sacrificed, for food. And so I'm a big believer in men having fun, having rowdiness. Right. But the bottom line is that most men are walking alone, and what they've got to do is link up these twin engines of continually feeding on and growing in an understanding of what true manhood is, and then having a band of brothers around them to help them perfect it in their life.
That's so key, the band of brothers idea there. I was actually my counselor. My wife and I see a counselor. He's a fantastic man, a good bit older than us. Could be a father type of figure, but he's just been tremendous in helping our marriage and helping me kind of see some things. And he asked me a question a few weeks back, and he said, is being in a group of men, accountability group, whatever you want to call it, band of brothers, is that more freeing or less freeing? And, I said less freeing because, my answer, my thought process went like, well, if I'm accountable to somebody, then I'm not as free to do the things that I want to do. But then I got to thinking about it. This is why he's so good, because he just leaves me with it. And I just kind of, think on it for a while. And I thought, no, actually, you know what? It's ultimately more freeing. And the reason is that I'm not only, if I'm by myself, I'm free to do all the things that I want to do, but I'm not free from my vices. I'm not free from the things that I shouldn't be doing, and I'm not free in the sense that I know myself as well as I think I ought to. And when you have men in your life, like you're talking about, that speak into your life and that are, that can tell you the things that you don't know about yourself and that can call you out and can hold you accountable, now you actually become a different kind of free because you're in your accountability to them. They point out your vices, and so you can do away with some of those things. And they point out the areas in which you're weak and that you need help in so that you can be freer to pursue successful things. And so I haven't actually let him know that yet. So you actually are hearing it before he gets to hear it. But they reminded me of this thought that I had. And so thank you again for bringing that up. I thought that's just really, really good.
Well, let me make a quick point, and,
Sure.
please don't think that I'm gunning at you for the use of the word accountability group. I understand what accountability groups are, and I've been in them, and I value them. But most men, if they even have a group, it's an accountability group, and it works something like this. They see everybody. They see a bunch of guys for breakfast once a month. In between, they're thinking about who they are, what do they need to take to those guys. So so basically, I've got to figure out what's wrong with me. Hang on to it for a couple of weeks. Have the courage to go to that breakfast.
Sure.
And over biscuits and gravy. I live in the South, so I can talk about biscuits and gravy. Biscuits and gravy. I tell them what's wrong with me, so they can give me advice or pray for me or whatever. Well, now I think that's one level valuable. But I got to tell you, if you're waiting for me to be that smart and that courageous, you'll be waiting a long time.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you about my latest victory. I may not tell you about my problems. What I need is a band of men I'm doing life with.
Yep.
They know Bev, my wife. They know me, and so they're it's not like I got some great moral deformities and they got to constantly be guarding me against like opening a vein or something. It's just that they know who I am. So if I check out the backside of the waitress 3 times at the restaurant, they go, dude, what's going on at home that your eyes are roaming like that? What's up?
Good.
They'll just be right on it. If I know some guys don't drink, some do, but I'm not trying to advocate it, but they're fine with me having a glass of wine or two with over steak or something. But if I'm on my 4th or 5th, hey, what's up, man? That's inappropriate. That's not who you are. What's going on? What's happening in your soul?
Yeah.
If they hear the angry cell phone conversation with my wife, they go, dude, what's happening at home? If you ever hear that Stephen Mansfield's doing a line, it's not cocaine, it's a line of Oreos. And so these guys
awesome.
know that a line of Oreos is like my weakness. So, even when I'm traveling, one of them will just check in, how's it going? Did you feel strong when you were speaking? Good. Everything's cool with, you're not doing anything. They'll even, I don't have a porn problem, but they'll even say, did you happen to buy some of that HBO porn late on Friday night? Was that any problem for you? That kind of stuff. They'll just check because we're men. We know each other. We're not hiding this stuff. But they'll say, you doing okay on the sweets? Everything cool there? Because they know my problem is not whiskey and women, and my problem is, Oreos and, dropping the F-bomb once in a while. So, they confront me on that stuff. They help me be stronger. They check with me. And again, it's not just about keeping me from creating some big mess morally. It's about encouraging me and inspiring me and saying, all right, man, you're doing good stuff out there. Anything I can pray for you for, anything you can help you with. So what I'm saying is, I'm happy for a guy to have an accountability group, and you're absolutely right. There's a form of freedom in that that's amazing. What's even more freeing for me is to have guys who know my life without me having to tell them about it, because we walk closely enough together. I mean, I've told my guys, if you need to call Bev to check on me, do it. In fact, just call Bev and check on me, check on her. Take her out to dinner with your wife while I'm gone or something. I mean, it's cool, whatever. My life's an open book, and we all have that with each other. And as a result, Bev knows exactly who to call if something goes wrong anywhere in our lives. And you can't believe the freedom and the security that's in that. So all I'm trying to urge is with the guys listening is another level of openness and transparency and connection to men that is just wonderfully freeing. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. Yep. And I 100% agree with that as well. I know we got a few minutes left here. I wanted to jump into your Great Man TV project. Greatman.tv. So it's if you guys want to, you can head over to greatman.tv and you can check that out. But give us an idea of what this is about, because I heard your podcast actually kind of announcing this several weeks back. And I thought, okay, I got to get Stephen Mansfield on here, talk about this thing, because it sounds exactly like something that the guys that are listening to this are really going to be interested in hearing more about.
Well, you're very kind to ask. For a lot of years, I've just sort of inserted the things I wanted to say to men into the Stephen Mansfield podcast. And the Stephen Mansfield podcast is mainly about faith, culture, worldwide events, things like that. So I would insert it, and that was fine. But I just finally got to the point, man, I want to do this right. So we've just launched this week, as you and I record this, just this week, we've launched greatman.tv. And that's a website for men It's just going to give you all kinds of information, connect you up with what we're doing. We got a toolbox we make available to the guys. We talk about books. We provide videos, just all sorts of things for men to help them be great men. And then at the same time, we've also just this week launched a Great Man podcast. So I'm now going to be doing 2 podcasts a week. One, the Stephen Mansfield podcast, more faith, culture, global events, Kurds, things in D.C. and so on, my travels. But then the Great Man podcast is all about men. For example, the one I just recorded yesterday is about how in the souls of men, anger masks hurt. And so when you say, hey, that guy's angry, he's not really angry. He's hurt about something. But our masculine souls cover it with anger. And then people, the psychologists or counselors who don't know better, try to deal with the anger rather than dealing with the hurt. So anyway, I'm helping guys decode their souls a little bit. So I'm very excited about that. Greatman.tv is the website, Great Man Podcast. And then, of course, all of our media is Great Man something. On Twitter, it's greatman.tv. On everything else, it's just Great Man TV. But anyway, you'll find us. We'll be everywhere. But it's all Great Man, just more great manness, as one of my African-American friends says about me. He says, there's a great manness. But anyway, we're very excited about this. There are a lot of great sites, a lot of great podcasts, a lot of great shows like this. We love them all, encourage them all. We're just going to play our role, too, and provide another slice of the pie. So we're excited about being part of this. Come join us.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're listening to this podcast, and if you've heard Mr. Mansfield speak before, you know this guy is all about bringing quality and common sense. And so you're going to want to follow this. Head over to greatman.tv, or you can head over to wolfandiron.com/Mansfield, and you'll get all the links, the show notes, and everything like that will be over there. Now, one last question to kind of wrap things up here, and it's this. What does it mean to you as a man to be able to do what you're doing? I mean, there are a lot of guys who, you know, you can't really think about what you're going to be doing when you're a kid and you grow up and you do something awesome, right? But you're doing some awesome stuff. And so I wanted to kind of know from your perspective, what does it mean to you as a man? How's it fulfilling you deep down in your soul to have an impact on the culture, have an impact on men?
Well, first of all, I mean, I never thought I'd be at this level. I'm very grateful for it. I mean, I'm not the most famous guy in the world, but you know, when you're regularly on Fox and CNN and you got, you know, books people are talking about, it's a real privilege. It humbles you. I'll tell you the thing I most want to say to men, though, and that is that it is very fulfilling to me. It's very happy. I'm very pleased at what I get to do. But I got here by just doing the next thing my hand found to do. You know, there's that, I don't know if all the guys who listen to your Bible readers, but in the Bible constantly, some guy whom God is using is told, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your heart. You know, whatever that next thing is, do it. And it's not like when I was 18, I had a dream that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. I mean, most of what I'm doing now didn't exist. We didn't know what podcasts were. We didn't know what cable television was, you know. It was back at the dark ages. So all of that to say that I never would have dreamed of what I'm doing now, and I'm so grateful for it, and travels around the world and all that stuff. Nobody would have thought in those terms. But I did, especially when I began to understand who God was in my life, I did begin to understand that he orchestrates the events of my life, and that my responsibility is to whatever the next thing is to do, whether I'm handling a crisis, doing the job I've been given well, doing the next project, whatever it is, all through my life. And I started very small. I mean, in high school I was flipping pizzas, you know, and burgers and stuff like that. And then I worked my way through college by, you know, doing a little yard company and mowing yards and all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, I think no matter what you're going to end up being one day, I mean, ultimately, your ultimate destiny is in the hands of, you know, God and forces that you can't control. But the key to getting where you're going to go is by doing the next thing well and tending your field well, tending your family, tending your soul, tending your body, tending your relationship with God and your children and so on well. So, it's very fulfilling to be where I am, and I could, you know, spend the next hour talking about, you know, the famous people I know and, you know, where I get to go and stuff like that. But I just don't want, you know, your listeners to have the focus on me or on that. I want them to realize that, you know, whether you're me or somebody 50 times more famous than me or wealthier than I am, the fact is you get there by doing the next thing well. And so focus that way, turn your heart towards being a great man and the full sense of what that means, and you'll see great success come to your life.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And love to get that insight there. It has been an absolute honor talking to you. This has been a great conversation. I know the guys listening to this are going to get a lot from it. Head over to wolfandiron.com/Mansfield and connect with Stephen Mansfield. See all the things he's got going on. Check out his books. Check out the podcast and the Great Man TV. And Mr. Mansfield, thank you so much again for being on here.
Mike, it's a privilege. Thanks so much, buddy.
Well, there you have it, men. I'd love to know what you thought about the episode. Feel free to reach out to me on any of my social media networks. And look, if you got something out of this, make sure another guy does too. Share the episode and make sure it gets in front of the guys that need to hear it the most. Until next time, keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.